My name is Lena Valdez, and on the night of October 14th, 2031, I was taken from my apartment in Austin, Texas, by a man who would 8 years later stand at an altar and promise to love me for the rest of our lives. People always ask how it felt. The truth is, the first thing I remember is silence. Not the absence of sound, but the sudden, impossible removal of every city hum I'd ever known. No refrigerator buzz, no distant sirens, no neighbor's TV bleeding through the walls. Just a perfect, vacuum-grade quiet that made my ears ring. I was sitting on my couch in an old UT hoodie, halfway through a bowl of cereal at 2:17 a.m., when the room folded. That's the only way I can describe it. The corners of my living room bent inward like wet paper, the overhead lights stretched into a white ribbon, and then I was somewhere else. I stood on a floor that looked like smoked glass. Above me, an immense curved ceiling glowed the soft blue of pre-dawn. The air tasted faintly of ozone and cinnamon. My cereal bowl was still in my hand, milk sloshing, Cheerios floating like tiny pale rafts. A man walked toward me. He was tall, maybe 6'4", wearing a charcoal jacket that shifted color when he moved, as if it couldn't decide whether it wanted to be fabric or liquid. His hair was black and a little too long, curling at the collar the way mine does when I let it grow out. His eyes were the exact shade of dark honey, and he looked devastated. "Lena," he said, voice cracking on the second syllable. "I'm so sorry. I swore I'd never do this to you." I threw the cereal bowl at his head. It passed straight through him and shattered against nothing, milk droplets hanging in the air like suspended pearls before they vanished. He flinched anyway. "Who the hell are you?" I shouted. My voice sounded small in that huge space. He took one careful step closer, hands open. "My name is Lena Valdez. I'm your husband. 8 years from now, you're going to marry me on a beach in Costa Rica at sunset. You'll be wearing a dress the color of sea glass, and you'll cry when I read my vows because you'll think they're too beautiful to be real. And right now, I've just broken every temporal law in the Accord by pulling you out of 2031 to save your life." I laughed. It came out high and sharp. "Great pickup line, buddy. 9 out of 10 for creativity." He didn't smile. "In 43 minutes, a drone swarm carrying weaponized Marburg variant is going to level half of Austin. You're on the primary target list because of the paper you haven't published yet on quantum entanglement signaling. I couldn't let you die." I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You're insane." "I know how this feels," he said quietly. "When I was taken, when you took me, it felt exactly like this. Terror and déjà vu braided together." He reached into his jacket and produced a photograph. Real paper, edges worn soft. He held it out but didn't force me to take it. In the picture, I was older, 35, maybe 36, standing next to the same man. We were on that Costa Rican beach he mentioned. My hair was braided with tiny white flowers. He was looking at me like the world began and ended in my eyes. I was looking at the camera and laughing so hard my face was blurred. On the back, in my own handwriting, were the words, "For the night you doubt this was worth it. Remember I chose you twice." I felt the floor tilt under me, even though it hadn't moved. Kalen's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "You have until the milk finishes evaporating to decide if you come willingly. After that, the window collapses and you go home to die. I won't force you. I promised you I never would." I looked at the floating milk droplets. They were shrinking, one by one, winking out like stars at dawn. I was 27 years old. I had a grant proposal due Monday, a cat named Pickles who hated everyone except me, and a mother who still cried every year on the anniversary of my dad's death. I wasn't ready to be a ghost in someone else's love story, but I took one step toward him. "Show me," I said. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for 8 years. The next weeks, months, were a blur of starlight and impossible science. Kalen's ship, because of course it was a ship, was grown, not built, a living thing of coral-like alloys and soft bioluminescence. He called her Evim. She hummed when she was happy. He never touched me without permission. Not once. He slept on the floor of the observation deck while I took the only bed. He cooked for me, real food, somehow, Chilean sea bass with mango salsa that tasted like my grandmother's kitchen. He told me stories about our life together that hadn't happened yet. The house we'd built on the lunar far side, the daughter we'd name Lucia, who would have my smile and his terrible sense of timing, the way I'd win the Nobel in 2039 and dedicate it to him for abducting me properly. I wanted to hate him. God, I tried. But every night he played a recording of my own voice, older, warmer, saying, "If you're listening to this, darling, it means he's doing the hardest thing I ever asked of him. Be gentle. He's terrified of losing you again." Again. On the 32nd day, or what felt like it, we watched Austin burn from orbit. Not the whole city, just enough. A surgical strike disguised as terrorism. The news feeds called it the Red Tuesday attack. I saw my apartment building collapse in a bloom of orange fire and cried until I threw up. Kaylin held my hair back and didn't say "I told you so." After that, I started asking questions. Why me? Because in every timeline where you die in 2031, humanity loses faster than light communication for another century. Billions suffer. Because I fell in love with you across 12 different versions of history and refused to live in a 13th where you weren't breathing. Why not just warn me? Because the Accord forbids direct interference. The only loophole is spousal extraction. Immediate family can be removed from lethal timelines. But only if the marriage is real, binding, and pre-existing in at least one stable branch. So you married me in the future to kidnap me in the past? He gave me the saddest smile I'd ever seen. Technically, you married me first. I was the one who got dragged onto a spaceship screaming. Touché. Time doesn't flow linearly on Evum. Some mornings I woke up and Kalen had new laugh lines. Some nights he was younger, smooth-cheeked and shy. He said the ship kept us phase-locked to the most probable thread, but love is a chaotic variable. I started to notice things. The way he always handed me coffee with 2 sugars before I asked. How he knew I hated thunderstorms because my dad died during one. The tiny scar on his left wrist shaped like a crescent moon. My bite mark, he said, from the first time we made love and I got overenthusiastic. I started to remember things that hadn't happened yet. We argued exactly once. I found the neurosuppressor he'd planned to use if I refused to come willingly, an elegant little crown of silver filaments. He kept it in a locked drawer like a loaded gun. I held it up in the middle of the mess hall and said, "You were going to erase me." He went white. "Only if you begged me to send you back. Only if living with the truth was worse than dying." I built it the week after Lucia. His voice broke. After we lost her in a different timeline. I couldn't watch you break again. I threw the suppressor across the room. It shattered like ice. Then I kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It was 8 years of grief and terror and impossible foreknowledge crashing together. He kissed me back like a drowning man finally reaching air. We didn't make it to the bed. Afterward, tangled in sheets that smelled like stardust, he traced the freckles on my shoulder and whispered, "You chose me twice." The return was always the plan. Kalen couldn't keep me in temporal exile forever. The Accord would send enforcers. So we built a life in the cracks. He dropped me back into 2031 exactly 43 minutes after he took me. The milk droplets were still evaporating. My apartment was untouched. Pickles was yelling for food. The grant proposal sat half-finished on my laptop. But everything was different, because now I knew what was coming. For the next 8 years, I lived 2 lives. Publicly, Dr. Lena Valdez, rising star in quantum information, winner of the 2038 Wolf Prize, famously reclusive, no social media, rumored to be a little spooky. Privately, I learned Swahili because Kalen spoke it in his sleep. I got a crescent moon tattooed on my wrist. I sent anonymous tips to the right intelligence agencies, so that Red Tuesday became a failed plot foiled at the last second. I saved my own life and 3 million others without anyone ever knowing. And every October 14th at 2:17 a.m., I left my window unlocked. He never came inside. He just stood on the fire escape in that same shifting jacket, older or younger depending on the year, and we looked at each other across the impossible distance of a single heartbeat. Some nights I blew him a kiss. Some nights I cried. One year I opened the window and shouted, "You still owe me a proper proposal, asshole." He laughed so hard, he nearly fell off the railing. On the 8th anniversary, October 14th, 2039, I didn't go home. Instead, I took a shuttle to Nocera, Costa Rica. I checked into a little beach house painted turquoise. I bought a dress the color of sea glass. I waited. At sunset, he walked across the sand barefoot, wearing linen rolled to the elbows, hair too long, eyes honey in the golden light. He dropped to one knee and produced a ring made of meteorite iron and a single perfect diamond that had traveled through time twice. "Lena Valdez," he said, voice shaking, "I have loved you since before I met you. Will you marry me again for the first time?" I tackled him into the sand before he finished the sentence. We said our vows as the sky turned violet and the waves applauded. I cried when he read the words he'd promised 8 years earlier, words I already knew by heart because I'd written them for him in another life. Later, when the guests, all 37 versions of our daughter Lucia from Safe Timelines, plus Pickles the cat wearing a bow tie, had gone home, we walked the beach alone. I asked the question I'd never dared before. "Kalen, which one of us started this?" He stopped, looked up at the stars that were older than our story and younger at the same time. "You did," he said softly. "You always did. I was just lucky enough to be abducted by my future wife." I laughed until I couldn't breathe, and he kissed the salt from my cheeks. People still ask how it felt, being taken that night. The truth is, it felt like coming home. Because sometimes the greatest love stories begin with a theft of time, of choice, of every certainty you thought you had, and end with you standing at an altar, promising forever to the thief who gave you the universe in exchange for one stolen heartbeat. And if on quiet nights you see a flicker of blue light in the Austin sky, don't be afraid. It's just a woman keeping a window unlocked for the man who will one day be her husband. Or maybe it's a man waiting for the woman who hasn't said yes yet. In our case, they're the same thing.